Well, the field we're stood in at the moment is a commercial crop of Lucerne on the university farm, which has been was sown 6 years ago. So we'd normally expect a 4 to 6 year lifespan, and this is really right at the end of its life. It's a legume, which means it fixes nitrogen, so you don't have to provide the crop with any nitrogen, which is a cost saving, and it is also a source of protein in the diet. So that's the real reasons for growing it. High yielding, relatively drought tolerant, which may become of more interest in the future. So that's why there is an increased level of interest at the moment. So today we've talked about site selection and the requirement being light, free draining soils in a high pH. We've talked about variety choice, and we've talked about time of sowing, and that's where we've looked at what the DairyCo trial is looking at. So we've had autumn versus spring establishment, and plots established at both of those times, and the spring established plots being with and without a cover crop. So we've got two comparisons, autumn versus spring, and spring with and without a cover crop. And the interest really is in the yields the following year, and the impact that the time of year it's sown and whether it's with a cover crop or not has on the yield, and also the feed quality the following year. Because if we can successfully establish it in the autumn and there's no impact, no penalty to the yield the following year, that's effectively less downtime for the field, or less loss in productivity for the farmer. So that's what the trial is looking at. It's early days in terms of we've got some numbers, but it'll really be next year before we get meaningful results back from it. In terms of soil type, light, free draining, it doesn't like wet feet getting wet over winter, and we tried establishing plots last autumn and it was too wet, so that was a sort of clearly told us that, and pH higher than most other crops you'd think of being sort of 6 to 6.5. For Lucerne we would lime to 7 and it will tolerate up to 8.5, so definitely higher than other arable crops, certainly. And once it's in the rotation, a 5-year break between Lucerne crops, because it does exhibit some autotoxicity and can become infected with stem eelworm, so 5-year break.
We're about to embark on some feeding studies linked to a DairyCo research protocol, where we are going to be cutting lucerne at different growth stages and feeding those to dairy cows to see what the benefits are of the different lucerne silages produced are on milk yield and dry matter intake. Previous research done at Reading has shown that we had a milk yield response of 3 kilos per cow per day when we fed lucerne at a 33% inclusion in the forage part of the ration, and a 1 kilo increase in dry matter intake. That was when lucerne was used with an additive added to it to ensile. The lucerne that we're planning on feeding, we're expecting to have a protein content of around 23%. Now this obviously has benefits to the farmer in that it may be able to enable him to reduce the protein content of his concentrates and hence reduce the amount of soya being fed. Soya being a rather expensive ingredient in dairy cow rations, and also, as well as being an economic reason for reducing soya, there's an environmental reason for reducing soya because of the effects of cutting down trees to make way for soya farms. So we can see a benefit of growing lucerne as twofold, and as well as being an economic advantage, there's also a sort of an environmental advantage of growing lucerne. As far as actually installing the product goes and feeding it, another area that we need to look at is the chop length of lucerne. Chop length is something which can affect the quality of the lucerne once it's ensiled, so part of the research protocol is to look at varying chop lengths and see whether and that's going to be fed through cattle, and digestion work done to see what the subsequent digestibility of the lucerne is from those trials.